Hello beautiful souls, and welcome back to this week's YouTube video. I am so excited to have you all here. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we are going to be talking about all different kinds of systems that you can use to interpret your life purpose and who you've come here to be in this lifetime. So let's get started. Whew, man, crouching is not fun. Does that work? I don't know. Okay, so we are just going to start with my favourite and the one that I obviously, or hopefully anyway, know the best, which is soulplan. And I have just made up somebody as an example to go through today because obviously I prefer to use charts with people's permission, and also I just thought it would be fun to make somebody up and see what comes through, you know, see what kind of person I've picked. If anybody out there has this name, then hi. Obviously we're going to start with soulplan, and you guys know how much I love soulplan, and that's because I think it's really simplistic, but also it's really accurate and it gives loads of detail, which I really like as well. And all of the systems that we're going to look at give lots of detail, but I do find that sometimes it's almost an overwhelming amount, whereas I feel like with soulplan it's enough that you know everything you need to know, but at the same time you don't feel overwhelmed or like, oh my gosh, this is a lot to digest. So I have made up somebody called Anna Emily Smith, and I literally just plucked that name out of thin air. So if anybody does have that name, then purely coincidental, but it'd be really funny if you did and you're watching this and you're like, oh, that's me. So let's just talk about this person, Anna's soulplan chart, which is a really interesting chart actually. She has a really good balance here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 energies are double energies, and then 3 combination energies. And that's quite good because the more double energies you have, the more focused and sometimes fixed your path can be. So this is actually a really good balance in a chart. So she has 3 polarities, which is the 2, the 3 and the 11 in her chart. Some people have polarities, some don't. It's absolutely fine either way. It's just what your soul has chosen to work with in this lifetime. So her downward triangle is her worldly aspects, which is what she's hoping to achieve in an everyday physical worldly sense. And then her upward triangle is obviously her spiritual chart, which is what her soul really wanted to achieve, or how it wanted to grow, or the lessons it wanted to experience and expand from. And then of course the soul destiny in the center is basically the sum total of who she is. So looking at this chart, I can see that she's going to be a very creative person, possibly overly creative, and maybe needing to, you know, balance things out a bit and come into a space of being focused. She's definitely somebody who has this verbal talent. Actually, she has these 2 energies which are definitely good for speech. They can also be good for writing, so her creativity could be channeled into some kind of writing, whether that's writing a book or poetry or a blog, something along those lines, certainly. But also you can say that 3s quite enjoy singing or acting, so it could be that actually she goes a bit further once her confidence builds. And her goals are really about stepping into a leadership role and really embodying the unique vibration that she essentially has. You know, she has kind of her own soul truth going on, so it's good for her to understand her uniqueness and then share it. And 18's usually quite ahead of their time. It's connected to Aquarius, so could be that she would feel like sometimes, you know, she's maybe a bit too futuristic with her thinking, and people are saying to her like, oh yeah, that's a nice thought, but it's not going to happen just yet. But it's good that she has this ability to think so far ahead. So really it's just like this leadership role, stepping into your power and really being of service with your creativity and with your expression. And I mean, maybe there could be a bit of teaching, because an 18 and a 3 together could make a really good teacher. And to be fair, she has the 5 spiritual goal, which is usually like the spiritual teacher of teachers. So maybe later on she might tune into the 3 differently, and instead of acting or singing or writing, maybe she actually decides to come forwards and be a teacher of some sorts. And then her spiritual chart is basically about feeling comfortable being here, being able to commit to things, not clinging on to the past, really healing any escapism, because this energy is all about emotional intelligence and, you know, this quality of sight and clairvoyancy. So she's probably quite an intuitive person, working with like-minded people, connecting to groups, and bringing people together. So it could really be that she uses her voice and her creativity to really bring groups of people together to teach them. So that could be workshops or events or speaking on stage, or maybe a YouTube channel or something like that, where she's able to express herself, inspiring other people and helping them to feel really great and is really optimistic and looks on the bright side of life, which again could be really helpful for people who maybe you're a bit stuck or feel a bit overwhelmed by life. It's about being really pioneering, really articulate, really assertive, like really putting her boundaries down in a really loving way so that she can really step forwards and share what it is she's here to do. So I really get a sense that this soul is probably going to have a bit of a journey to understand herself first, understand her role, get in touch with her creativity, bring through some confidence perhaps, really work on her self-worth here so that she is able to then step into that role of the teacher and leader perhaps to help other people. So what I really love about Soulplan is it is very simple and obvious to me. It's very much, here are the challenges that your soul has chosen to experience. Here are the talents that your soul has chosen to bring forth. Here are the goals that your soul wanted, and here is who you are in the sum of everything. And I find that really simplistic, and I feel like when I'm explaining it to a client or I'm teaching on the Soul Plan course, it's really straightforward, and I really like that. And I think it makes it very grounded and very tangible because it's very simplistic language. What's my biggest challenge? Well, look straight at your worldly challenges. That's going to tell you everything you need to know. So honestly, I really like that, because other systems that I'm going to talk about and other systems that I know of, it takes a little bit more digging or trying to understand things, a bit more interpretation, whereas with this it's very straightforward. It's like, here you go, this is what the challenge you're facing is, and you want to turn that into a strength as well. And that's another thing I love about Soul Plan, is the whole point of your challenges is that you're able to overcome them and turn them into a strength. I think that's quite a unique element of it, because other charts, as far as I'm aware, you know, other systems, you really are told this is your challenge and that's kind of it, you can't change it. So I do like the way that Soul Plan empowers you in that sense. So this person, even though her challenge might start off being too much creativity or being a bit scattered with her energy, ultimately it's about her coming into a space of focus and really being quite a visionary and being able to get herself out there and share her creativity and her ideas and manifesting what it is that she desires. So I think that's really exciting. Ultimately, I think that Soul Plan is really straightforward, very empowering. It's just, for me, just so accurate. I just love it. So with Soul Plan, you only use the birth name. So as I have here, just the person's birth name. So you don't need where you were born or the time that you were born or anything like that. You just need the birth name, just as it's spelled on the birth certificate, which is again something that I really like and is something slightly more unique. I quite enjoy that element actually, because it's just really straightforward. You take the name and that's it. There's no complications of do you know what time you're born or anything like that. Some people of course don't have direct access to their birth certificate, and if they don't, perhaps because it's been lost or destroyed or anything like that, then there are other things that we can do to help you to discover your soul plan. On the whole, most people have access to their birth certificate. Absolutely, this system to me is just amazing. The simplicity, the straightforwardness and the accuracy are just something that I really like, and I can always come back to it. Even now, 6 years later, I still am discovering things about my chart and thinking, oh my god, I'm literally going through my worldly goal right now, or oh my gosh, my spiritual talent is showing up. So I find it just really powerful and really amazing, and that's why I love talking about it with you guys and sharing it with you guys and giving my readings and teaching the course to other people who want to become practitioners. It's just helped me so much, so I really love when I'm able to share that with you. So let's take a look and see first of all what her Western astrology chart would come through as. Okay, so I gave her a birthday which I made it the 20th of February year 2000. I set the birth time for 1313 and I set the place to London just because honestly I couldn't think of anything else. It's like, February. So here we go. So here's all her information for which I have put in for this chart. So what's coming through is a sun in Pisces, the moon in Virgo, and then the rising is Cancer. So that's really interesting. So with Western astrology, it's calculated slightly differently to Vedic astrology, which is why I want to talk about Vedic astrology later, because that's quite different. and I think that will be really useful for any of you guys who don't know anything about that. But obviously Western astrology is set with the 12 houses, of course, and the 12 signs, which you can see. So with Western astrology, you have your ascendant, which is essentially what was rising in the sky at the time that you were being born. So here obviously the ascendant is Cancer, and you can just see it's pointing to the direct degree as well, which for our person we've made up is 17 degrees, so you can just see 17 there. So this person's rising is Cancer, and in Western astrology you kind of focus on your sun, moon and rising. They all play a large part. With your rising sign, it's very much how other people see you and how you kind of are perceived in the world around you. So that's why it's really important to understand your rising, and your moon is your emotions, which is also really important to understand how your emotions are going to be processed, and also how you're going to express them as well for relationships and things, so that you really understand yourself. So hers is in Virgo, so maybe, you know, she might be kind of hiding her emotions a bit and not really showing her emotions to other people. And then obviously your Mercury is catering more towards how you communicate and your logical mind and how you process information. And your Mars is how you exert your impulses and how you use your power as well. Obviously Mars is like that really fiery planet, so how are you using that, how are you expressing that in everyday life? So each planet obviously has its own meaning, and it's really great to understand it and to work through it. So for this person, this is obviously her Cancer is in her first house, but then she has Leo as her second house, Virgo as her third house, Libra is her fourth house, so her moon is in her third house. So understanding, like, what does it mean to have a Virgo moon in your third house? So that's something you can just like look up on Google, or you can use Cafe Astrology, or you can go and see an astrologer as well. I happen to know a couple of amazing astrologers, so if you would like a reading with an astrologer, obviously let me know and I can put you in touch with them. But really understanding how that shows up. So this is when it comes to the moon cycle and you're looking at a new moon or a full moon, you can think to yourself, okay, like recently we just had a full moon in Sagittarius, so Anna could come to her chart and she could say, right, where's Sagittarius, which is here, and it's in her 6th house, and then she's got some other planets in here as well, so she can look that up and be like, okay, what do these planets mean in that house, and also what degree is Sagittarius in my chart in the 6th house. So what does Sagittarius in the 6th house mean? Oh, this is what the full moon in Sagittarius is going to bring up for me personally in my chart. And for example, if it was like a new moon in Gemini, for example, then she could come and be like, okay, here's Gemini in my chart and it's in my 12th house, so what's going on there? Like, what does that mean for me? Well, I mean, 12th house is usually like endings and stuff. So I would definitely recommend looking up your Western astrology chart. I use Cafe Astrology, but there are of course loads of different websites that you can use for this. And I think it's just really great to understand particularly your sun, moon and rising. But if you can go to your Mercury and your Mars or your Venus or your Jupiter or your north and your south node, that's great, because it can really help to know what's going on. Like your south node is like your past life and what you did in that past life, and your north node is going to be this life and what you hope to achieve and do in this life. So that can be really useful to look at. North and south nodes tend to be similar for similar generations or similar age groups because it moves very slowly. So I think it really shows how people are really born into a generation because they're hoping to support other people within that generation to grow and to move forwards and to do new things. So I think it's really cool and really exciting. But now we're going to talk about Vedic astrology, which is really great, and I learned about this in 2020. I'd heard of it before, but I hadn't ever looked it up properly or looked into it, so I'm really excited to talk about this with you because, as I say, there will definitely be some differences, and this is why I've made up this person for you to go through her chart. Okay, so now we are looking at Anna Smith's Vedic astrology chart, and I'm just using this website, vedicastrology.us.com. There are others, of course, but what I have been taught to understand is the Northern Indian chart. I don't know the Southern Indian chart, although I don't imagine it's too much different, but essentially you have your first house, second house, third house, fourth house, fifth, sixth, seventh, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like that. And then you have your different planets. So you've got there Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, and you have two different planets that we don't have in the Western astrology that we just looked at, which is Ketu and Rahu, and they don't have Neptune and Pluto. And Ketu is essentially very spiritual, gentle planet, and Rahu is like this really unconventional, unpredictable, like I want to say chaotic, but not quite, but it's like about change, you know, changing things up. And the really cool thing about Vedic astrology is that mathematically it is slightly more accurate than Western astrology. So often when you look at your Vedic astrology chart, you're like, oh my god, I'm a different sun sign, and I'm a different moon sign, or I'm a different ascendant, and that's very often the case, and that's because it really has followed the fact that Earth and the universe and everything has changed like 1 or 2 degrees over however many thousands of years. So it's the same kind of maths that they use for astronomy and things like that, so it is slightly more accurate as far as I'm aware. If you know something different, of course, that's absolutely fine, but that's just what I understand. And in Vedic astrology they use your ascendant as your main sign, that's your main focus, even though it is still an ascendant and you still have your sun, you still have your moon, their emphasis is on your ascendant. So interestingly here, her ascendant is Gemini and her sun is Aquarius, whereas before it was Pisces for the sun and Cancer for the ascendant and then Virgo for the moon. So her chart is very different, so she might look at this and be like, whoa, this is so different. And then her Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, etc., as you can see here. So already we have some differences. The focus is on Gemini being her ascendant, which is obviously going to be in her first house, and she doesn't have any other planets in her first house actually. That's fine, you don't have to. Most of her planets are actually here in her 8th, 9th and 10th house, which is really interesting. So she's really put a lot into that area, but there's loads that you can go into. What I just want to go into is understanding that the interpretations will be slightly different, so I would definitely say to do your research and to be like, okay, what is my ascendant in Gemini in Vedic astrology? When you're googling or when you're going to work with someone, you can ask them what that means. Again, I know some people who work with Vedic astrology, so if you want to have a reading, just let me know and I can put you in touch with them. But the really cool thing about Vedic astrology is the Vimshottari, which allows you to predict things and to understand when certain things are going to happen in your life. So I just want to show you that for this person we've made up, Anna Smith. So you can just see here, this website is fantastic, by the way, for understanding and really getting into your Vimshottari. So from the age of 0 to 10, she's in her Venus, which is, interestingly enough, Venus is a really great time to think about relationships and marriage, of course. So I'm not suggesting that she has met somebody in those ages, but that doesn't mean she couldn't end up marrying somebody from her school years. So if we looked at her chart currently, she's currently in her moon, and she's in her moon in Jupiter, so then she could look at what her moon is, which I think was Leo, and she could look at what Jupiter was, which is Aries, and then she can go and research what does that mean to be in your moon and to have your Jupiter in Aries, what's coming up. So basically you go through different stages. So the left hand column is the phase that you're going through, and the right hand column is basically the secondary phase, and then you have the date of time that you have it for and how long, which I think is so cool. So right now she's probably in a stage which is really like focused on going within. The moon is very good for like going within, but it's also good for like nurturing. So then you can go back to your first chart and be like, okay, so where's my moon, which for her is in her 3rd house? Where is her Jupiter, which is in Aries in her 11th house? So you can kind of look at what's being highlighted by that time in your life, which is really cool. So it's really good for understanding, you know, what's going to be happening, what you're going to be going through. As I said, Rahu is that kind of unconventional time, so when you're in Rahu it's like things are happening, changes are happening. So really interesting. I mean, they've gone up to 110. If she lived to 110, that'd be so cool. How are you going to say that? 2111. So this is a really great thing to look up and to check to see what's going on. So as I say, technically when you're in your Venus is when you're looking more into relationships and potentially marriage. So maybe she really did meet somebody when she was quite young and connected and then ended up marrying them later, which could be, for example, when her sun was in Venus or her moon was in Venus, might be a really good time actually, for example. So I would definitely say look this up, understand what's going on, and see the difference between your Western and your Vedic. And what I quite like to do is when it's a new or a full moon, I like to look at both of my charts for Western and Vedic astrology, and I like to look at the moon in the Western and the Vedic astrology signs to see what it's in. So recently we had a full moon in Sagittarius in Western astrology, but it was in Scorpio in Vedic astrology. So I could look at my charts and think, okay, right, what's that highlighting in both my charts with both those different signs, which honestly is just so helpful. And it was such an intense moon, so you can definitely use that and almost pick and choose between the two. So again, just like Western astrology, Vedic astrology is awesome. It's so cool that you have this system and that you can look into it more and really understand more of what's going on in terms of dates and things like that, which is really useful. But again, they are both very big systems that do require a lot of time to really understand what's going on, and it might feel overwhelming to look at this and think, oh my gosh, okay, like what does that mean? What is that showing up for? And that's again why I really love Soulplan, because it's so much more straightforward and streamlined, and I just think it's so much easier to understand. These systems are awesome. They're really, really great. They're usually very accurate when you get into the degrees of the signs that you have, but definitely it takes a lot longer to do that. So I think if you're somebody who wants to understand yourself in your chart, I think Soulplan is such a great option because it's so simple. And if you want to do something like this, I think you probably would need to do a bit more research or have a few more sessions to really understand the depth of what's going on in your chart. I hope this is working. Imagine if it wasn't. That'd be shit, wouldn't it? Okay, so the next thing that we're going to look at for our fake person is human design, which I think is a really interesting system, but it's, I think, possibly the most complex out of all of them. And so I definitely think this is something where you need a reading or you need time to really go in and do your research. So I'm going to share with you the basics as I understand them. If I get something slightly wrong, I apologize, because I'm still understanding this system on a personal level. I do know, again, some people who are human design practitioners, so if you're interested in a reading, of course, again, reach out and I can put you in touch with them. So we'll just go through the basics here. So there are 4 different types. There's generators, and within that you can have manifesting generators, such as we have here. You have reflectors, projectors, and manifestors. And reflectors and projectors are slightly rarer, or they're a lower percentage of the population. Most, like 70% of the population, is generators or manifesting generators. So there are fewer people who would be the projectors and the reflectors, for example. And if you are, that's so cool. And if you're not, that's also cool. There's no kind of special hierarchy or anything like that. And then basically you have your strategy, which is how you respond. So that's how you navigate the world. And it's different for everyone. So this is about responding, like responding to problems or responding to requests and things like that. And then not self-themed. This is when you're like really out of balance or in a lower vibration. It's in a space of frustration. Inner authority is the solar plexus, which I think is this one here, if memory serves. And then you have your profile. So each of these numbers means something. And again, that's something that you can research and look up, like what's a profile 2, what's a profile 4, what do they mean together, what am I here to do in that sense. Single definition. And then your incarnation cross, again, is something to look at, look it up. Again, you can Google each of these individual things and be like, what does a profile 2 out of 4 mean? What does single definition mean? What does incarnation cross mean? And you can really get into it quite deeply. If you're somebody who's quite open to doing that, I definitely would recommend it, because the more you get into it, the more interesting it is. But human design is a blend of like astrology, as far as I'm aware, Western astrology, and gene keys and the chakra system, and just so many different things. So many different systems. I think it's the most complex, and that's why I would say really do some research or have a reading and then do some more research, because this is a system that's definitely worth knowing, but it's something that's going to take longer to really kind of understand your chart. I've been aware of my chart for about 4 years and I still don't totally understand everything that's going on. So essentially the numbers and the symbols on the right hand side here are the date that you were born. So for example, the sun was 52.2 etc, etc, etc. And then on the left, these are your conception dates, which I can never think of the word, but essentially it's like your soul enters your body a few months before you're born inside the womb. And so it also looks at what was going on and what the sun, the moon, the rising, Leo, etc is in that sense. So this is where it can get quite complicated. I mean, if you stick to just this right hand side, you'll still learn loads about yourself and really understand. And I definitely found my human design was so helpful for understanding something. Like, for example, my profile means that I can't sell to strangers. For whatever reason, I need to have some kind of rapport or connection with the people I'm selling to, because if I would just try and say to somebody, hey, do you want to have a reading with me, then they're going to be like, what, why? But then when they connect with me, they're like, oh, do you know what, she's really down to earth, we get on with her, it's cool, she knows her stuff, I definitely would like a reading. And that's 100% what I've experienced. Is like, when I get to know somebody, they're usually like, oh, I can see your passion and your enthusiasm and love for what you do, and I'd really like to be a part of that, or I'd really like to experience what you offer. So it's so interesting for me. So essentially each of these parts of the body, so essentially each of these boxes represents a part of the body. So obviously you've got your crown, your third eye, your throat, your heart. So your root, your emotional center, your sacral center, you have your head center, your third eye center, your throat chakra center, your G center, and your splenic center. Then you have the channels, which are these, and you have your gates, which are these numbers, and all of these numbers are connected, I believe, to the gene keys. So that's what you can look up and understand as well. And the thing with human design, again, is you can't change it. So this is what it'll always look like. So this person has gate 59 lit up with part of a channel, but it doesn't quite reach 6, and it never will. Like, you're not going to be able to change it to make it reach 6. This is what your chart will always look like, which is again why I just love soul plan, because you can turn things around and you can expand on your chart and help it to grow and empower yourself, whereas this will always look like this for this person we have made up here. So if you have a defined center, which is when it's colored in as we have, then this is really kind of, you're generating your own energy, and it's quite consistent, it's always burning, which is really cool. If you have an undefined center, which is white, but there's a gate coloured in, like here, so this is undefined with a white center with the coloured in gates, then this is where you become like a bit like the moon, like you reflect other people or other things going on around you, and you amplify things, which again can be really cool. So I believe this one is the heart, I think that's the G center maybe. So this is really like they would reflect and really amplify other people from their heart space, which is really cool. And then if you have a totally open center, like here, is when you have no channels, none of the gates are coloured in, it's just totally open. So this is when it's very open, very intuitive, and really does amplify. So once you know which each of these are, you can look it up and go into it more and be like, okay, what does an undefined heart center mean, or crown center mean, or what does an open G center mean, or whatever. You can Google those and look them up, and you can essentially go to looking at gene keys to understand what each of these numbers lit up are, to see what's going on in your chart. So here her root center is defined, and we have a couple of gates lit up, and then we have some channels lit up, and the colours for the channels do mean things as well. So the red is what's unconscious and the black is what's conscious, so it's what you're like recognizing within yourself, whereas red is stuff that you might not realize and it's there, like it's untapped potential basically. So you can Google that, you can be like, okay, my root center is defined, what does that mean? Gate 60 has a channel connected to gate 3, what does that mean? So you can like really go into it and really do a lot of research, and that's why I probably recommend having a session at least with a practitioner to start to understand your chart. But at the same time, maybe this is a great way to get started, and there are of course loads of books and YouTube channels and Instagram accounts that talk all about human design, which is really fascinating and really interesting. If you can mostly look at your profile, your incarnation cross, and your type, that's a really great way to start off with. And then you can get more into understanding what's going on with your centers. Are they defined? Are they open? Are they undefined? What channels do you have open? What gates do you have open? Like, what's going on there? You can really get into it, which is really cool. It's just really nice. So again, you know, these numbers are in black because that's something you're consciously aware of, but the red you're unconscious of, so you can look that up and see what else is going on. There's just so many different things you can interpret and get into, and as I say, it is a complex system, so I definitely recommend doing some research. But I know when you first see a chart like this, it can just feel a bit like, whoa, what's going on? So I thought I would just include this to share some information that I understand, and as I say, I'm still learning about and still enjoying, but I definitely think, again, this is why I like soulplan, because it's so simplified compared to this, and you can just really get the answers that you're looking for pretty much straight away. So I hope that you've really enjoyed this. I'm going to stop there because even though there are loads of other systems we can look at, I think this video is going to be really long if I go any longer on, so I might split this video into two. If it's too long, might leave it as one. I'll see what it's like when I edit it, but I hope that you've enjoyed this, and let me know what your favourite system is in the comments below.